Dr. Jazz. But Marilyn, I wanted to ask you first. I listened to the record you did with Angelica Sanchez, How to Turn the Moon, and I was really I didn't expect you and Angelica to do a duo, and I wanted to ask you, how did that one happen actually, and what's the story behind that one?
Well, before I answer, should I turn off my video?
Yeah, maybe.
But then you won't be able to see me either, right?
I mean, otherwise, if you want, we can leave the video on, and I can put, like, if you send me a picture, if you want, I can then use a picture of you on your site.
Okay, you could take, okay, why don't we leave it on then, and you can take a picture from my website.
Okay, and I'll take one of your press kits pictures, and I basically, I can subdivide the screen and put a picture on your site, and I'm on video, and on yours it's like a picture. You'll see. I'll send you also a preview. It's no problem.
All right, because it's weird if I can see you, you can't see me.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, Angelica Sanchez. Yeah, Angelica, I met her up here in Woodstock at a creative music studio intensive. She was up here, and she decided to write some piano music that we could play together. So it's mostly her compositions, and some, just improvisations. So.
Yeah, but I mean, did you guys play together before, or it was like a studio record only, like, or I mean, like only this session that happened for?
Well, no, we did at least one concert that I remember in New York at a place called the Greenwich House. And I think we did the recording after that concert.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to hear you guys. I mean, I love two pianos. Sometimes can be like, too much, but like you seem to have found like this gelling chemistry together.
Yeah, I mean, she said that she wrote the compositions with my playing in mind, so that they would be things that I could relate to,
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
I think she's a wonderful musician, and also has become a really good friend. A wonderful, very warm, and
Yeah, I love her playing. I mean, I have a couple of records of her, and beautiful. But such a beautiful composer. I mean, nice that you guys hooked up. I mean, it's beautiful to hear that. So, yeah. But otherwise, I wanted to ask you also about Joe. You mentioned you wanted to go on tour in October, and it's I love Joe's playing so much, but when does your story with Joe begin? Did you guys ever play like already before in like 80s or 70s, or is actually like the trio Tapestry, it started when it came out, like 2018 or 2019?
Yeah, it started then. I am not so good with historical stuff. And
No, sure.
But let's see. Joe says that we met when I was doing a recording with Anthony Braxton somewhere, and he was doing a recording somewhere else in the building, and he stopped in to kind of hang out. I don't actually remember that, but he said that's when we met. So that would have been probably back in the 80s.
80s, yeah.
We live about an hour away from each other, so he had heard some concerts I did, and how did this happen? Well, okay, I don't actually remember playing with him until we started doing trio Tapestry.
Oh, okay.
But no, wait a minute. He sat in with me at the Village Vanguard maybe 15 years ago or something. No, getting all mixed up with the
No,
date.
come on.
Okay, there were 2 years when I had a week at the Village Vanguard with Paul Motian,
Oh, probably, yeah.
Mark Helias. And
Oh, yeah.
one of those times, Joe was in the audience and he had his saxophone and he came and sat in with us.
Oh, wow.
So, but we must have played together before then. And what happened was that Carmen Castaldi, the drummer in Trio Tapestry, contacted me at one point about coming out to Cleveland, where he lives, to play a concert. And he said it could be solo or it could be with him or whatever I want. And I chose to play with him. So we played a duo concert.
Really? Oh, wow.
I remember Joe saying, oh, he's great. He's a really good friend of mine. We grew up together in Cleveland and all this. So Joe thought that since I had played with Carmen and I had played with him, that we should try a trio. So we did that, and and the rest is history.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
I love this trio. How you guys, you know, I mean, such beautiful compositions, the Chapel Song and Night Creatures and all that stuff. I listen to it so much, and it's just, you seem to have found like immediate chemistry also with Joe. I mean, he seems to be so easy to play with. Like,
yeah, he is, and he writes, beautiful compositions, all different sorts of things. He writes a lot. When we were on tour, he was constantly writing, and almost every day he'd come with a new composition. Oh, I wrote this last night, or I wrote this when we were in Vienna, and that kind of thing. So, and he's very open, and he tries a lot of different things, and also is another wonderful person. There are a lot of wonderful people in this music, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, well, I've started doing these talks now and got to play with many guys, and yeah, it's so beautiful when the chemistry is there with the musicians also off stage. I mean, I think that's the most important when you're like 3 weeks on tour and it's just like, okay, that feels like home, right?
Yeah, what's wonderful is when you get so familiar with the music, you get really comfortable with it, and then you can really get inside it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go all kinds of places with it. So.
Did you guys ever talk about what to do musically for that project, or just like started playing the tunes and?
Well, Joe just wrote tunes.
That was it, like, yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yes, you seem to know like what to do. That's what I find fascinating. I mean, it seems like a collective, but like every note you play, it makes sense in a way. I don't know how to put it, but if you know what I mean, like he seemed to have written the music especially for you guys, like really.
I'm sure there was, I'm sure he did actually. There might be a few things in there that are older. At the beginning, we played some, other compositions of his. Hang on a second. I am remembering other things I did with Joe. God, this is really terrible. I must be getting too old or something.
Come on.
No, I've never been good with remembering dates. But I remember we played a concert at the Miller Theater with my trio with Paul Motian and Mark, and adding Joe at Columbia University.
Oh man!
And that was around the same time that I was playing at the Village Vanguard, around 2006, 2005, sometime around there.
Oh wow! Man, I hope there are some bootlegs of this stuff. I have to search around. Really, I mean, I'd love to hear that trio with Joe. I mean, okay.
Yeah, and I sat in once with his group, Us Five.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, when James Weidman, who normally played with him, was supposed to have another gig that night. So I sat in.
How was that like?
Oh, it was great. Esperanza was playing bass, and
Francisco Mela, I think it's in drums, right?
Francisco, yeah, it was really fantastic. And I remember he gave me some music beforehand and I practiced it like crazy, you know. And then I met him that afternoon at the club and he said, oh, here. And he just handed me all this new music that I had never seen before. So there were, not everything went completely smoothly, but I'm not sure anybody knew but me and the band, you know. So
no, it's amazing. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. No, yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. But I wanted to ask you about the trio. Also, you know, working for ECM for Manfred.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know, of course, you've done the Gary records. I mean, Paul Motian and Gary Peacock trio already for ECM. How is it for you working for ECM? Especially the piano heritage seems to be so. Not seems, it is strong for ECM. I mean, it set up this entire new vibe for piano playing. How was it for you, or is it working with Manfred?
Great, you know, he is very involved with the music. I mean, he's a musician himself, bass player, and I think he played in an orchestra for a while.
I didn't know that. Well, okay.
So he really understands the music and he gets very involved. You know, it's like almost like he's part of the band. And he has a great ear. And if there's something that he thinks is wrong, he'll make you fix it or change it. So there were some times where I played something that, you know, he had a problem with, and then I had to just sort of record over that little part there. But that I mean, that's how involved he gets, you know. Yeah.
It's nice to have that someone, right? Because you're as a musician, you're really involved in the process, and it's nice to have an outside ear to always.
I remember the feeling of having to, or wanting to rise to the challenge of that, you know, wanting to rise to the challenge. All other recordings I've done, I did whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah, and, exactly.
You know, and that's also, I liked that, you know, but it's also, you know, I also enjoyed having this sort of guiding hand, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you know, it's a direction he's been doing for 50 years. So, and you play one note and it's just like, wow, okay, that's it. It's incredible. Yeah. Were you aware of, like, let's say in early 70s already of the ECM when?
Yeah, somewhat. I had heard some of Keith Jarrett's solo recordings, the Cone concert.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And so I was aware of it, but I wasn't really aware of the whole history and legacy, not only of ECM, but of all jazz. Because I didn't really come into it until around 1978 myself.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Like improvisation and jazz, really, or?
Jazz, yeah. I mean, I have improvised since I was very young because I played for dancers.
Oh, wow, okay.
I was like around 14, you know.
Wow.
They played for dance classes, and that was all improvisation. But it was it had very kind of strict boundaries, like it was in a certain time and it would repeat over and over while they did whatever they were doing. I mean, the exercises, the stuff they were doing would repeat over and over. And I would tend to just have like a tonal center and just play around that. So it was a very, very different thing when I first started improvising. Just out in the world, the very first time felt like jumping off a cliff. It was very scary.
How did that happen? What was the trigger that you remember that?
I was living in Boston at the time, and I had a friend, Baird Hersey, who, oddly enough, he now also lives in Woodstock. But anyway, he was also a guitarist and composer, and he had a band called The Year of the Ear.
Oh.
And they played his compositions, and they were very interesting, and I used to go hear them a lot, and I became friendly with Baird. And so he came over to my place one day, and he said, okay, let's play. And I was like, oh, well, he said, just start playing and don't stop. And so that's what I did. And that's what I did for years, actually. It was years before I had a sense of space and silence and phrasing and all that. But it was just like to get something moving, you know?
Wow. How did you gain? I mean, of course, you started playing, but like this, you mentioned the sense of space and movement and of interaction. How did this begin? How did you learn that? By listening to, I don't know, or
I think it started when I started playing with Braxton.
Anthony, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And how did he discover you? But I mean, like, how did you meet? Like, how is the story with Anthony?
In Woodstock at the Creative Music Studio.
There it began. Oh, okay. Oh.
In around 1977.
Wow.
We met.
Yeah. Well.
I was playing in a workshop led by George Russell, and he heard me playing, and he asked me to play with him on his concert, you know, because the guiding artists would come and teach for a week.
Yeah.
And at the end of the week, there would be a student concert of their compositions, and they would also play a concert on their own. So he asked me to play duo with him.
Oh, wow, man.
And
okay.
There's actually a recording of that. It was very amazing. It's like we clicked immediately.
Yeah. Oh.
The Creative Music Studio has put out some compilations, you know, some recordings, and I think it's number 2 of those where that concert is on there. And listening back to it, I was amazed how we just immediately, you know, kind of understood each other.
Yeah.
So
it's incredible, the quartet. I mean, yeah, I talked with Gerry about that. It's just like, you know, the chemistry that you guys had. That's, I mean, I asked Gerry how he knew how you guys achieved that. This going from, you know, written stuff and his compositions, that this was for me. When I listen to it, it's just like what's written and what's improvised, and it's incredible.
Well, that was the effect he was trying to achieve, Braxton, you know.
How did you cope with that in the beginning? Like,
yeah, great. You know, also, I felt very comfortable with Braxton's music because it involved a lot of sight reading, and which I was good at then, you know. And let's see, the tonalities and things. There were things that I was familiar with from contemporary classical music that I studied in school at New England Conservatory. So there were some things that were familiar, you know, to me. And it was like a bridge from there to a lot of other things.
Yeah, sure. And this, it was with Anthony. You first also came to Europe then with his quartet, or touring?
Well, not with the quartet, with his creative music.
Oh, the Köln. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, yeah, I love it. Yeah. How was that experience for you? The first time touring?
Amazing. My first time, I think it was my first time flying. Could it be? And my first time coming to Europe, which I had wanted to do all my life.
Yeah.
And my first time playing like real gigs and all that, you know, it was amazing.
Yeah, I always love this question of people coming the first time to Europe, because it's like, always a dream of a jazz musician to be touring, and if it's meets your expectations, or like
Yeah.
when it first happens, and it's like a romantic notion, I think.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I remember we were in Paris and Cologne on that trip.
Yeah.
And I remember taking a walk, leaving the hotel in Cologne and taking a walk and checking the street signs so that I could find my way back. And there was one sign, Einbahnstraße.
Oh yeah.
So coming back to the hotel, I got lost, and I asked somebody, sorry, where is, wo ist Einbahnstraße? And they looked at me like I was crazy, because what it means is one-way street,
Yeah.
So, but then they knew where the hotel was, so they could help me get back there. I always remember that. It was very funny.
It's also bizarre because, when you started touring, it was still East Germany, and it was still Yugoslavia, actually. And, nowadays it's so easy to tour because I mean, before, let's say pre-COVID, it's one currency, more or less, the borders are open. But back then, I guess it was quite different, I'll put it mildly.
Yeah. No, I think we played in every country in Western Europe and some in the East. Yeah. I remember we played at the Prague Jazz Festival, at Warsaw Jazz Festival. Wow. We played in East Berlin and Halle in Germany,
sure, yeah.
Which was in the East. We played in Yugoslavia, which was, I guess, considered the East.
Yeah, definitely.
Those days it was still Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were in Slovenia, Croatia.
Yeah.
Well, pretty. We weren't in Montenegro or Bosnia.
Probably Serbia, Belgrade. I guess you guys played. Yeah.
We were in Serbia.
Serbia,
Belgrade, and Novi Sad. We played in Novi Sad.
Really? Oh wow.
Had our craziest experience in our entire history in Novi Sad.
What happened?
And I think the story of that is in Graham Locke's book, Forces in Motion. I think it's somewhere, I think. And sorry, Graham, if I don't remember exactly, because he listens to these podcasts and then he gets on my case.
Oh no.
Okay. Bad things, wrong things, stupid things. So yeah. Anthony and his wife, Nikki, and Gerry went to the bank to change money. And they had these bags of money that they took to the bank. And when they were in the bank, Gerry started taking photos because he thought it was very picturesque, the women in their long black clothes and things. And apparently everybody else could see the guards closing in, and they were trying to say, Gerry, stop, but he didn't hear them, and he just kept taking pictures. So then they arrested them, and they closed the bank. They wouldn't let anybody in, they wouldn't let anybody out, and they took them in the back. And luckily they had an interpreter, a young
man.
And she said, oh, they don't know, they're American jazz musicians. And then that somehow that made everything okay. And they came running back to the hotel because we were already late. And I remember somebody driving us across cornfields or something to get to the airport on time. And this like crazy ride to the airport. And then we got there, we almost didn't make the flight. And when we got to Venice, and we had to take a boat over to the gig. And when we got there, the organizer came running out and said, well, we can't have the gig because there's too many people and it's against the fire laws. And we were like, no, we are playing this concert. We went through like a lot to get here. And so we got up on the stage, we threw our stuff down in the dressing room. And while we were on stage, suddenly, there was this smell of smoke, and um, what had happened was that John Lindbergh, who was playing bass, threw his jacket on top of the radiator.
Oh man.
And so it was just so crazy, the craziest day, really, of my life, I think.
Man. But you guys played the gig then?
We played the
Actually,
gig. We just
oh
ran
wow.
onto the stage, you know.
Wow, that's amazing.
Play the gig.
That's
So
amazing.
I will always remember Novi Sad for that. I think that was Novi Sad, not Belgium. Yeah.
Oh man, wow, yeah, touring. That's
And
like
we I'm still there. Froze up a little. I hope the internet's
no, it's good. Yeah.
okay. And what's the capital of Macedonia again?
Oh, Skopje.
Skopje. We were in Skopje.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they have a great jazz festival there for years. Yeah,
yeah.
it's beautiful.
And I also played in Yugoslavia with Reggie Workman.
Really?
Reggie's wife is.
Yeah, Maya. She's from Maribor, actually. Yeah. Reggie actually lived for some time in Maribor, like years ago. Yeah, I didn't even know that. And then someone told me, yeah, Reggie was in town. I was like, really? Why did I? Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, beautiful that you got, that you got to tour everywhere with that band. I wanted to ask you, Marilyn, like within this story with Anthony, like how did you decide to become a band leader? Like when did this notion happen? Especially on, you started with solo piano playing, and then that quartet with Peter and Kowalt and John Batch. I mean, this is such an underrated group. For me, I don't know. I love that music.
Yeah. Well, I think from the beginning, I had decided that I needed to do my own thing as well as play in Anthony's. And when I did a tour in Europe with that quartet, that was 1981. That was actually before the Braxton Quartet gigs started.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that only happened when George Lewis wasn't playing anymore.
Yeah.
So, and that was in, I think, the early 80s.
Yeah.
Playing with the quartet. So it was important to me to also do my own thing. In a lot of ways, I didn't really like being a band leader. It's a lot of work and responsibility, and I do compose, but I feel I in a lot of ways I'm more of an improviser than a composer. But when
interesting. Okay.
You have to compose, so I had to compose and take care of all the business and do all that. So after the trios with Paul Motian and Gary Peacock and Paul Motian and Mark Helias, I haven't really had my own band since then.
Interesting. But if you see yourself as a band leader, do you see that you became more comfortable through years, like since the early 80s and then as the time grew, or?
Yeah, I feel like I lost the energy to be in that position.
Yeah, it takes a lot of toll and a lot of all these other things to get everything together. I know what you mean. Yeah.
I'm sure I'll still do some projects here and there,
Yeah. How did I mentioned this quartet? How did the connection with Peter Kowalt happen? Actually, I mean, you seem to play a lot with European improvisers, and you play different with Barry Guy and Paul Litton, let's say, than with Paul Motian and Mark Helias or Gary Peacock. But how did this really strong input with the European improvisational scene happen?
That also started at the Creative Music Studio, and Peter, I met him at the Creative Music Studio.
There. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how that came about, And Billy Bang, I must also have met there. And John Betch, I guess that's where I met them. And, you know, the music is all different, and it's like the same person playing it. I mean, I with Barry Guy, or I play with Gary Peacock, and I feel like it's still me playing, but the content has to be appropriate to the music that you're given and the people you're playing with. There used to be a quartet called Quartet Noir. Because we all dressed in black all the time. And in that quartet, that was totally improvised. And there's no way that I would play like a jazz tune or something in that quartet, because it had its own, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? It had its, well, it wasn't jazz.
No, I mean,
It was in a way almost like improvised classical music.
Yeah, that's with Joel and Urs, right? And Fritz. No, that one.
And so you kind of had to stay within certain boundaries. And I remember sometimes playing some modal things, and that didn't go over well in that quartet. Well, you know, it wasn't what it was about. So I like the feeling of being able to do different things with different people, and some things feel more comfortable than others. You know, the things that don't feel as comfortable are challenges that are good.
Definitely, was it? You know, I love the trio with Paul Litton and Barry Guy. I'm such a big fan of Barry, and
amazing.
Like, talking about challenges, like, how was it for you then when you start playing with those guys? You know, because Barry has created his own language, improvisationally, really like intense, and his compositional style is completely unique also. And how did you start playing with Barry actually, and how was that like for you as a musician, as a pianist?
I met Barry for the first time, and I do remember this date, oddly, in 1992, because there was a festival in Stockholm called Solo 92.
Okay.
And I heard him play, and I remember that's where I first heard him. It's where I first heard Anders Jorman, Swedish bass player.
Incredible, incredible.
And so that was an amazing time for me, that I met both of them, because they both were very influential and powerful people in my life and my music. So that's where I met Barry. And I guess just at some festival or other somewhere in Europe, I ran into him again. And Barry and Evan Parker and Paul Litton, they all were aware of the work with Braxton. So we just met. Somehow we started playing just improvising. And if I remember, it was a trio that I had put together with Barry and Paul Litton. And at one point, Barry started bringing some compositions in. We started playing them, and then he brought more and more in. And now it really has kind of morphed into Barry's trio and his compositions. Which is fine, you know. And I feel very comfortable with it, with the music, and he is just an amazing, really, truly amazing musician, Barry.
He's incredible. Did you notice, like, you said, like, okay, you tried for Quartet Noir some modal things and it didn't work. That you sense there's a difference between European improvisers and American, or back then it was, or maybe still now it is, or no?
I don't know, that's a kind of
It's a cliche, stupid question, but like, I don't know.
kind of a cliche question. I'd say everyone is different and the histories of both places are different, and there are similarities and differences that is very difficult to put into words.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, there is intellect and passion on both sides
yeah,
of the ocean because those are human things, and the forms that they take differ somewhat according to people's cultures. So there is the just free improv scene, and a lot of that in Europe, and the jazz scene over here. And I think there's been a lot of influence going both
yeah,
ways,
sure.
you know.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, like, you know, when I listen to your trios, you know, Amaryllis, let's say, and then Ithaca, and it's almost the same period, and they sound like completely different. It's, you know, that's what I mean. Like the character of musicians, of course, it's way different also. And
yeah, but I mean, all those recordings with Barry, they're his compositions.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So I'm not going to suddenly start playing Night in Tunisia or something.
No, sure, no, come on, no. Sure.
Just like I wouldn't suddenly start playing a Mozart sonata in the middle of well,
no, I know what you mean.
Well, you know, I mean, yeah, things like you use the word language, they have their own language.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
Aesthetic, that's the word I was looking for.
Aesthetics, yeah, exactly.
You know, every composer, every music has its own aesthetic.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be a part of that, you bring your voice into it, but you also have to respect where that's coming from, and you have to be appropriate in some sense.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to be appropriate to that.
Yeah.
Don't you find that the same thing?
Sorry?
Don't you find the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe coming from Slovenia, like when I first time I went to New York, I felt like this strong energy there that was different from what was here in Europe for some time. But then I started playing more and more with European improvisers, and I don't know, it's like you said, like I said, it's a stupid question already in the beginning. It's all about the personality of a musician, like you said, and the aesthetic, wherever he or she comes from. I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's not a stupid question.
But it's like, you know, the German, I mean, like the German, East German improvisation scene was really based on a political statement as well. And the British scene, you know, with Evan and Barry and all these guys and John Stevens, and, you know, they came from their own and they created actually their own world. That's what I mean. And the US scene created its own scene, still sound-wise, they're all really different. And if you're put in one and to the other, I think you have to adjust, and somehow you seem to blend always perfectly in wherever situation you're thrown into. That's what I find so fascinating, you know, whether you're doing it with Billy Bang or, you know, Anthony, or then you Barry Guy or Paul Motian. You know, I find it quite fascinating that you maintain your voice, but still somehow contribute so much to their music also.
I guess if there would be something that I couldn't relate to, then I would have a hard time, you know, doing it. But there's so much good and interesting music. I mean, the music over here, the jazz and improv scene really comes from Black music.
You
know, that's a big difference. Like it wouldn't have happened without that.
Yeah, that's true.
Something else might have happened, but it would have been very different. So there is a different energy of where that came from as opposed to in Europe. But again, we're all human. We all have human feelings. So, you know, Peter Brotzmann playing with passion and strength is going to sound different from, say, Cecil Taylor playing with passion and strength, or Coltrane.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe one reason I relate to all these different music is that I grew up with Western classical music and, you know, studied that composition and classical piano and all that. And at the same time, had some background in improvisation, so that when I met Anthony, that was really the starting point of things. I felt like I could use all of that.
Yeah, and gel it together. Yeah.
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 So that was super, super important, that time with Anthony.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah, that's like 20 universities there, like for a person and musician. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marilyn, not to take too much of your time, I just wanted to ask you also about, you know, I mentioned already the trio with Gary Peacock and Paul Motian, and it's one of my favorite Amaryllis. I mean, I listened to that album so much, you know, and I love Paul Motian. I'm such a huge fan, and Gary also. And how did that trio begin and happen actually? And how was it to play like with Paul and Gary? I mean, like.
Well, Paul and I had played for years before. I had a trio with Paul and Reggie Workman, and Paul and I had a duo. And then
I didn't know about the duo. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Then there was a long period of time where we didn't play. I mean, no special reason, just, you know, it's people go where they go.
Yeah, sure.
All that. And then I was into a particular piece of Annette Peacock's called Gesture Without Plot, and I had transcribed it off the recording. And a while after that, I heard that she had moved to Woodstock, and I called and I got her phone number, and I called her and it just said, well, you know, hi, I just want to say hello and welcome to Woodstock and all that. And, you know, I transcribed this piece of yours. I wonder if you would look at it or listen to it and tell me if it's okay. And she did, and it was. And then we sort of developed this friendship. And at a certain point, I thought I would love to do a project where just of her music. And my first thought was to do it solo. And then she said, well, Gary lives in this area, so I could ask him, because I didn't know Gary. I had never met him.
Oh, wow. Personally. Okay. Yeah.
And Gary said he'd do it. And then I said, well, then I should probably just make it a trio. I'll ask Paul Motian. Not even at that time really knowing the history of Gary and Paul playing as a rhythm section, you know, it just, okay, Annette brought in Gary, and I thought, all right, well, Paul would work in this project, you know? So that's how that came about.
Oh.
That came about.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful trio. I mean, you know, and then also with Mark. Mark is, you know, I love Mark. I played a little with Mark, and we did some touring and records, and he's such an incredible, powerful player also. I mean, but such a different character than Gary. Like, you know, I love how the music changed also then. It's just like making a soup and you're throwing in a little bit different spices than, yeah. Beautiful. Just to one last thought, like about your future planning, like you said, you're not thinking about making band leading, you know, and not being such a thing anymore, or still, but like, what are your plans? What are you preparing or composing now, or thinking about, or?
Well, there is some music that I wrote back in the 80s that I wanted to record, and was going to do that with ECM before suddenly COVID hit.
Yeah.
You know, was going to record them.
Like solo piano, or like for a band, or?
Well, first I thought solo piano, and then I thought maybe a duo with Anders Jorman, because I haven't played with him in many, many years.
Oh, wow.
And he would be perfect playing that music, maybe adding a drummer, maybe not, I'm not sure. And so I'm still hoping that that will happen after this is over, you know, to do that recording.
Oh, beautiful.
You know, I'm sure in the future there will be some things I decide to do, but it has to come really out of a need and a desire, not just, well, I have to do something and have to, you know, put it out there and this and that to keep my name out there.
Sure,
I'm
sure. Yeah.
not into that at all. I don't care, actually. So I hope that Trio Tapestry continues, and the trio with Barry Guy,
Yeah.
and or other projects with Barry Guy. There's a saxophonist, Yuma Uesaka, and we did a duo recording of his music.
Oh man, I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's called Streams, is the name of it.
Write it down.
And it's on the Polish label, not.
Oh, not two. Yeah, yeah, sure. Marek. Yeah.
I think it's on that one. Yeah, because there are a couple.
I'll find it.
Yeah, there are a couple good independent Polish labels now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah.
You know Fundacja Slučaj, they're really good also.
Yeah, there's that one and Not Two. Those are the two I know.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah.
And a few years ago when I was in Warsaw, I think it was the Jazz Society. You know, I mean, people are really into things there. They're really serious about it. So.
So I'll have to check this out. Super. Nice to hear that you're going to bring out some new music. I mean, that's beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful news.
There are other projects that just aren't out yet, you know, that people are, they're looking for a label or a way to put something out, you know. Yeah. There is a trumpet player composer in Norway called Gunhild Seim, and she's a wonderful composer. So there's been some recordings and concerts with her. I hope that we can do that again. And I should just say, in April, I am supposed to come to Scandinavia with a Danish drummer, Michaela Ostergaard, and bass player Tommy Anderson. So I'm hoping that will happen. I mean, there's a lot of things, and I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of things.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice, super. I'm looking forward to check out some of these things. So definitely, so beautiful.
I hope I'll get to hear you play. I hope I'll get to meet you.
Man, yeah, me too. If you're.
Dr. Jazz.